There's no dream of making an album with Biggie and Puffy or none of them. We're not sweating it like that. They sell records, we sell records. Well, I guess you could call that selling records, what they do. Really, there's no competition. People are really making too much out of it than it is. And the East Coast, West Coast thing is something that the journalists and people are making just to get paid off it so it can drag out. So they're perpetuating it so it can be drama. When it all go down, don't look at me.
I was the liaison between the Black Panther Party and the OAAU. At the same time, I was Malcolm's sister's bodyguard. So I was in constant contact with Lumumba Shakur, who was the head of the Black Panther Party in Harlem. His brother Zaid Shakur, the husband of Assata Shakur, was the head of Black Panther Party in the Bronx. Zaid and I was much closer because we were close in age. Matula Shakur, the youngest brother, the purported leader of the Black Liberation Army, who was at Lincoln Hospital running a detox program using acupuncture for brothers and sisters who was hooked on heroin. So that was the world I was in, and this is the time of the formation of the Black Panther Party, the Black Liberation Army. I was a part of the group that opened the first breakfast program for the Black Panther Party in New York City, and I opened the second breakfast program on 125th Street for the OAU. I've met so many kings and so many queens. Benny Shakur. You know, Tupac was a very good friend of my kids. And it was one of my children that he was very fond of, who was very fond of him. I didn't actually like Tupac very much in the beginning, even though I know his mom and know his dad, everything. But he was a good guy. And he did, you know, like I said, very close to my kids. The day before he was killed, he called and wanted to set up a meeting with me when he got back to New York the next week. He called from Vegas. The meeting was about him. He was telling me that him and Biggie was really not fighting each other. That this was the magazines, this was the news people, this was their enemy that has created this whole thing. And the main reason that it was being pushed so hard is because Tupac, he said him and Biggie had got together and they'd come up with a way to take over distribution of rap music. And I told him then, I says, you know, that can get you killed. You're dealing with this mafia and the mafia, both. And he said, we know, we understand, but I told him, you and Biggie can't pull this off by yourself. And he said, no, we're meeting with other rappers and we have a lot of other rappers on board. And he said, so Professor Small, when I get back in New York next week, I'm gonna be at the fight tomorrow night. Get back in New York next week, I'm coming over to the house, we're gonna talk. And I said, cool. And I handed the phone back to my daughter. And we would hear the next day that he was shot to death, you know, after that fight. But he was very clear. And it didn't end with Tupac. Right after Tupac got shot, you remember there was 2 rappers that got killed in Jersey also. They were a part of the group with him and Biggie. Then of course Biggie would be killed later. But this all had to do with distribution.
Yo, YouTube, what up? It's your homie Gabum in the building. And this is MAKAVELI Media. I got something pretty heavy I want to drop on y'all today. And I want to get your opinion on it. And I want to take a really good look at it. Revolutionary black activist Professor James Smalls just said recently in a documentary called The Voice of the Ancestors, heavy is the crown. You got to check it out. He said in this documentary that he talked to Tupac the day before Tupac was gunned down in Las Vegas. And you will not believe the conversation he had with one Tupac Shakur. Now let's backtrack for a minute. Because Professor James Smalls ain't no clout chaser. And he most definitely ain't in it for 15 minutes of fame. And I don't believe Professor James Smalls will come to bullshit anybody. He gains absolutely nothing from it. James Smalls worked with Malcolm X's family. He worked with the Black Panthers. He worked with, and particularly, the Shakur family. From Assata Shakur to Miss Afeni Shakur to Tupac's stepdad, Mutula Shakur, and everybody in between. This brother knew Tupac before Tupac knew Tupac, before Tupac was born. He said that Tupac had took a liking to one of his children, probably his daughter. And he said Tupac called the house and he got on the phone with Tupac and he said that Tupac told him that he didn't have a problem with Biggie. The whole beef was started with the magazines and the music industry to put these two against each other because him and Biggie had figured out how to take over the music distribution for hip hop. And I guess at one point had planned to do this together. That's heavy. Because he said, he told Tupac, well, you know, they're gonna kill y'all over that. And he said him and Biggie understood that. Now, when you hear the distribution, to take over the distribution, it's a lot that goes into that. Because when you control the distribution, you have the complete say-so over the project. If you put this out, if you control when it comes out and how it comes out, you also controls what comes out. Now you can say absolutely what you want. You ain't got to worry about, backlash from politicians or, like Time Warner caved into, the war against gangster rap music. If Tupac controlled the distribution of his own music, oh my God, he would have said absolutely whatever he felt with no consequence, because ultimately he would only have to answer to himself. So now you got more militant music coming from Pac. Now you got gangster music coming from Big and Pac out there worst nightmares. You know what I mean? Now you got, more Tupac fight back stuff. You know what I mean? More chant music, more street anthems. And now you got, Tupac really being able to convey his message, to the young black youth in society. And, and just to voice the struggle of all minorities all around the world. This would have been a major deal, man. A major thing. But Professor James Smalls came out and said, he said, some mafia, they bleeped it. He said, oh, that's controlled by them. Now you stepping on toes. Now you got a death wish. Now you swimming in some murky waters. Yeah. He warned them. But he said Tupac understood what he was up against. Now, let's take a backtrack. We gotta take a backtrack because this is weird. When Biggie died out in Los Angeles, it was a known fact in his circle, but maybe not publicly, but he was leaving Bad Boy Records to start his own record label. This is fact. Whether Tupac was getting a record label through Death Row or Quincy Jones or trying to start one himself, by all accounts, Tupac was getting his own record label. That's another fact. Both brothers die, neither one of them get a record label. Both brothers die. Neither one gets the record label. Now, it's not completely unheard of for an artist to want to start his own record label. But he said Tupac and Biggie wanted to control the distribution of rap music. And they were bringing on other artists. Let that sink in for a minute. Not only did these brothers want to control their own music, they wanted to control the currency of rap music, period. And they were bringing on other artists. So not only did they become hip to the game, now they want to hip other artists, put them down, make them smart, cut out the middleman. No more eating off of us. We gonna eat off of us. Now that's the dangerous part, because now you cutting off other people's money. Oh yeah. The one rapper you see on TV, there's 500 people eating off of him. And when it's all said and done, it's probably around 1,500 people eating off that one popular rapper. Through publishing, through royalties, through marketing, through promotions, through management, through distribution. Now, I don't know when Tupac was trying to, court Biggie or recruit Biggie or make Biggie a part of Thug Life, and he was teaching Biggie and telling Biggie, dropping these jewels that Biggie talk about Tupac was giving him knowledge of the game. Was this the time that he was discussing, we need to start our own record company. We need to start our own source of distribution. Well, these the things that, Tupac and Biggie was talking about. And how did they go from that to feuding with each other? Who did they tell this information to? Who was the mole? Who was the rat? Who was the one that said, hey, these brothers talking about doing something big. They talking about doing something big. And the one way to mess that up is to put these two against each other. Pops used to always tell me, man, big business, not everybody business. Everybody ain't got to know what you got going on, because sometimes they can sabotage it. Who wouldn't like the idea that Biggie and Tupac was talking about starting a distribution company or a record label or both? You think Puffy would have liked that this conversation was happening between Biggie and Tupac? You think Jimmy Iovine would have liked that? And you got to understand, I don't think Bad Boy was really that established at this point in time. I think it was more so, Craig Mack and Bad Boy was an upstart label that was gaining momentum, becoming popular. And I think Tupac time and Interscope was almost up. And, Bad Boy and, different entities was trying to recruit Tupac to sign him with their label. And at this time, Tupac wanted to be a free agent. He wanted to start his own label. But when he got locked up and the court cases mounted and the beef was on and people were still talking about getting him, he signed with Suge Knight. And some people even question that. But my point is, this is what Tupac told Professor James Smalls, that there was no beef with Biggie. It was all, manifested and, blown out of proportion through the music industry of magazines, tabloids, headlines, and news media outlets. All I know is that it's mighty strange. If they was working on something like this, to have them two beef was crazy. Tupac got shot in the midst of him hanging out with Biggie and them. All this is around the same time. And then they come out later, somebody tell Tupac, you ain't know, that was Biggie homeboy that shot you. And I'm not saying it wasn't, but it's quite possible somebody could have paid him to take that shot. I had these two brothers beefing, and everything they worked on just got thrown out the window. Is it really that odd or that hard to believe when you think about it? Somebody didn't want this to happen, and guess what? It didn't. But he wanted to start a meeting. He wanted to have a meeting with Professor James Smalls when he got back from the fight. I guess to help him strategize and put this together. And that meeting never happened. Nah, that meeting never took place because Tupac was shot down and would later die in Las Vegas. And less than a year later, the same fate happened to the notorious B.I.G. I don't know how accurate this information is. I don't know how many of you guys will be willing to receive this information or even understand it, because we'll never know the truth at this point in time. But is it really that far-fetched? If you look at everything that happened, if you look at everything that didn't happen, no arrest was made. This came from somebody really, 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 really powerful. And not one person, some bodies. The two most influential rap artists in this point in time of hip hop. Bi-coastal. One in New York City. The Mecca of hip hop, the heart and soul of hip hop on the East Coast, that point in time in hip hop history. New York, King of New York, Biggie. And the West Coast ambassador, number one with a bullet, California Love, Tupac. Both coming together with hopes of starting their own record label. Maybe not together, maybe separately, but with the understanding of how to control the distribution in the whole music industry of hip hop. Both gunned down and taken off the table. Tell me what you think. Don't forget to share and like this video. Tell a family member, tell a friend. Don't forget to sub to the channel. This is MAKAVELI Media. It's been a pleasure as always. I'm your homie Gab. I'm signing off. I'm about to hit y'all with the peace.